Hey, my name is Alex. I'm with Prime Real Estate Experts. Just a quick disclaimer before the video starts. I am not an economist. I am just a real estate agent that knows a thing or two about the economy. Also, before we get into it, I will be relating a lot of this to the Utah market because that's what I know the best. I am a realtor in Utah for Pete's sake. So before we get into it, I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. It may be a little bit more difficult because I do have a lot to cover, so buckle up. Let's get into it. What do you guys think drives the market? Go ahead, pause the video, go down to the comment section, and let me know before we start. So the answer to that question is basic economics. It's just supply and demand. So what happens when you have really high demand and really low supply is typically prices go up. Now we saw this a lot with the new Xbox and PlayStation consoles. Supply was really low because there was a chip shortage, and demand was really high because all the 12-year-olds wanted their new console. So what happened was all of the parents and all of the older children were wanting to buy the consoles at a higher price. That's what happens when you have a ton of demand and very little supply. Okay, now the inverse of this is when you have high supply and low demand. That's a weird looking arrow. So what happens here is one of two things. Either prices stagnate or prices come down. Now, it depends on the situation of depending on which one happens. So if demand is extremely low, like if there's almost no demand and there's a ton of supply, then prices are going to come down significantly to basically get to incentivize people to buy those products, right? Now, if demand is relatively low and supply is relatively high, prices may stagnate. They may drop a little bit, but they're not going to crash just because there is still a little bit of demand and there's not a ton of supply, right? So it just depends on the situation. Now, how does this relate to real estate market? Well, it does quite a lot actually, because that's one of the things that drives our market the most is how much supply and how much demand we have. So across the US right now, we are seeing a lot of demand, okay, and very little supply. So the reason for this is just because people are wanting to move now. People want to buy in bigger homes, people want to buy nicer homes. There's a lot of people moving into the US, and also we're not really building enough homes, right? So we just have a crazy shortage of lumber, metal, things like that. That's why the prices of those have went up. They're coming back down a little bit. But yeah, we're just not building enough and we're not selling enough homes to keep up with the demand that we have. Especially in Utah, like 3 years ago, the same time of the year, we had 8,400 homes on the market. And that was more of a healthy market, right? Now, this year, same time of the year as of like today, we only have 1,950 homes on the market. Okay, so it went from 8,400 just 3 years ago to now we have less than 2,000. That is absolutely bonkers. And per the last census, we are the fastest growing state in the whole country. So we have a ton of demand and basically 1 month of supply. Now, sort of piggybacking off the supply and demand thing, the other thing that is affecting our home prices is population growth. Now, this is kind of obvious of why it would affect it. The biggest thing is because people are moving not only into the US, but into Utah. People are, wanting to invest more. People are being born every day, and it's someone's birthday every day, right? So all of those reasons, all of those things are going to affect demand because, okay, someone turns 18 or someone turns 20, their priorities are going to change. They're going to want to buy a home. That's going to increase demand, right? The other thing is investors really like buying homes. That's an increase on demand. And if people move in from either out of the country or out of the state to your state, that's also going to increase demand because they're also going to want a home. So that's another thing that's really affecting our demand tremendously, is just because of how many people we have moving in, not only into the US, but just into our different states. So the biggest question is this sustainable? And the honest answer is no, it's not. So this is how real estate appreciation works. Basically what happens is we get, let's just say 20%, okay? And negative 20%. Okay? So this is typically how real estate appreciation works. What happens is you have your appreciation right here. This is positive appreciation, meaning prices go up. And this is negative appreciation, meaning prices come down. So what typically happens in a real estate cycle is we get our booms. Okay, so for example, this year across the US, home prices went up 20%. And just Utah alone, our prices went up closer to 27.3%. So we had a lot of appreciation last year, right? So that's this big drop up here. And then what's gonna happen this year is we're expected to see 10 to 15% appreciation in Utah. So our appreciation, boom, right there. So this is what you would call a seller's market right here, right? So a seller's market, and then kind of more back to normal is closer to anywhere from 5 to 3% appreciation. That's closer to normal. Now that's more of a buyer's market right here because it's a little bit slower. We're not seeing a crazy demand up here, but we're just seeing a little bit smaller demand, okay? And then it maybe comes back up because people are, needing more homes for whatever reason, and then it comes back down, okay? And then goes up, and then maybe we'll have a recession in the mix somewhere, okay? Sorry. Now we'll just leave that. Just ignore it. We'll just say it's right over here, okay? Maybe we'll have a recession in the mix, maybe for a quarter or two, okay? And then it'll go back up, okay? So that's typically how real estate appreciation works. You're not just gonna see it cruise up at 20% every year. That's not sustainable at all, not even a little bit. But what does happen there is it turns into more of a seller's market because, for example, lower supply, higher demand, boosts up competition, then boosts up prices, right? That's where you're seeing that appreciation. And then when it slows down, inevitably when the market flips, turns into more of a buyer's market, we're gonna see less appreciation because there's more supply, lower demand, or it's just even across the board, right? So we're gonna see our little bit less appreciation. And I'll actually show a graph of what our home prices have done over the last 40 or so years. I'll actually pull it up right now. This is like an actual graph of what home prices do. The biggest concern right now, and this is kind of why we saw a run in real estate prices over the last year or two, is because interest rates were really low. Because of COVID, the Fed decreased interest rates to incentivize people buying stuff. Rates were really low, money was really cheap to borrow, so people were like, I'll just buy a house. And that made home prices shoot up like crazy, right? But what's happening now is because there's so much inflation going on, the Fed's gonna have to increase rates. So they literally went from, at the lowest they were, I believe they were 2.6, and now they're at like 4.5, which is absolutely nuts. It went up 2%. 2% just in the last year, which is absolutely bonkers. So this will affect your payment, not just your monthly payment, but also how much you can afford and how much you'll be paying over time tremendously, right? So let's just say on a $500,000 home, okay, your rate goes from a 4% to a 5%, okay? So how would that affect you? It's only 1%, doesn't seem like a whole lot. But what this would actually do is it would increase your monthly payment, just your monthly payment, by about $300, okay? So let's just throw out a number. Your mortgage goes from $1,500 a month to $1,800 a month, okay? The other thing it would do is you'd be paying over $100,000, or sorry, you'd be paying almost $100,000 extra in interest over the lifetime of the loan. That's a lot of money. That's a really good amount of money. And that's just 1% increase. And we already saw this kind of a jump happen in January. We went from 3.5% interest rate to 4.5% where we're at right now. So we've already seen that. And you may be asking, well, how did that affect home prices? The answer is not at all. So we had enough demand and not enough supply to the point where that increase of interest rate didn't affect home prices at all. What it did was it kicked a few people out of the market because now they can't afford as much of a home. And the way that works is like this. Let's go back to this $300 number again from that 1% increase in rates. For every $10,000 you put down on a home, that decreases your monthly payment by $40. So if we go back to that $300 number, that increased your payment by $300. So if we use this $40, if we divide $40 by 300, that's going to give us 7.5. Now if you times that by 10,000, that gives us $75,000. So that's how much of a home, that's how much more or less of a home you can afford with just a percentage change in interest rates. Okay, so let's say like you got pre-approved when interest rates were 3.5, you could afford a $500,000 home. And now that rates jumped up to 4.5, now you can only afford a $425,000 home. That'll not only affect your affordability because it'll affect your monthly payment, your debt to income ratios, but it will affect how much you pay monthly, and it'll affect how much you pay over time. So obviously you want to buy homes when interest rates are lower because it's going to save you a ton of money, right? And this is another thing that a lot of people don't understand is they think, oh, I'll just put down a ton of money on a house and it'll change my payment a lot. And it really doesn't. And this is one of the principles I teach a lot of my clients. Let's say you have a $10,000 car loan and you're paying $148 a month, right? We'll just say $148 a month. And you want to put down, instead of paying that off, you want to put that $10K down on a home, right? So instead of paying this off, like I said, you want to just put down an extra $10K. Well, right here, it's only going to affect your payments by about $40 a month. Where if you just paid off this car, it would affect your monthly payments by $148. So the biggest thing that affects your monthly payment on a home isn't your interest, isn't how much you put down, but it's actually your interest rate. So what about recessions, right? And what about 2008? We'll get to that in a second, but we're going to talk about recessions right now. So how do recessions affect home prices? In short, they do come down. Now you may be asking why. Okay? Now the reason home prices come down during a recession is because the labor market isn't typically as strong as it is before because people lose their jobs, people aren't making as much money, people don't have as much income, people are worried about other things. Rather than buying a home, they're worried about paying the bills. So that makes our demand go down tremendously sometimes a lot, like in 2008, and sometimes not very much, like almost every other recession that we've had recently, right? So typically what happens, demand goes down, supply is either the same, or it goes up or it goes down. Either way, we have almost no demand. So it makes our home prices come down. By how much? Historically speaking, not very much. Around 5% is what we usually see. So let's just say, you want to buy during a recession, right? And let's just say home prices come down like they usually do, about 5%. So this previous year, we saw 10% appreciation, and now we see 5% depreciation. So you're like, oh, I don't want to buy right here because it's too high. I'm just going to buy right here. Let's just say you buy at the very dip of the market. Well, instead of paying 10% over, well, you just saved yourself an extra 5%, but you're still paying 5% over than if you would have bought right here. And another side note on this is home prices coming down typically only last around 2 quarters, so 6 months. So you don't really have a whole lot of time to buy that dip anyway, right? So this is the thing, is the best time to buy real estate was last year, and we're going to be saying that a lot. Like, for example, would you have bought a home in California 30 years ago if you were able to? Hindsight's 2020, of course you would have. A lot of people are in the belief that we're going to have another 2008 style recession, but a lot of people don't exactly understand what happened in 2008. A lot of people just see home prices went up a ton and they came down, right? That's what a lot of people think. But really what happened during 2008 is a little bit more complicated than that. It had a lot to do with lending, right? Now what happened in 2008 was something called ninja loans, or you can also call them no-doc loans. Now, they're the exact same thing, but we're just going to go with ninja because that's what it sounds cooler, right? So ninja means no income, no job, no assets, loan, right? So basically, they didn't call this back then in 2008, they called it no-doc. But ninja loans, Basically, I could go into a bank and say, hey, I make 10 grand a month. I want to buy a house. I have good credit. And then I could walk out with a pre-approval letter of $800,000. All they had to do was run my credit, right? And obviously, for obvious reasons, some people said they could afford more than they actually could. And, they ended up defaulting on their mortgage. So what we saw was a huge increase of foreclosures and a lot of people just trying to sell their homes before they get foreclosed on just to get out from under it, right? And because everybody was doing that, we had basically no demand because everybody was selling. And if you were smart and you saw it coming, then you were going to be the one who takes advantage of it and buys stuff. But not a whole lot of people saw it coming for some reason. It's almost like people lie about their income. Nobody saw that coming apparently. So yeah, if you were the smart guy who had a ton of cash reserves, took advantage of that and bought the dip, you're probably sitting really pretty right now. So will a 2008 style recession happen again? No, not a chance. Now the reason for this is because our lending restrictions have gotten a lot tighter. Now if I was the same guy who said I made 10K and I went into a bank and said, hey, give me 800K. They would have to basically check how much I make, pay stubs. They need 2 years of tax returns. They need to do a credit report. They need to make sure they know where my down payment is actually coming from. And then they'd also have to use my family and a kidney as collateral. The most realistic thing I can see happening to make home prices come down is the Fed increasing interest rates to combat inflation. Now, typically in a normal market, for every 1% increase in rates, home prices come down anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. And now if you're going to wait for that dip, keep in mind, if we go back to our previous example, you're still going to be paying a lot more per month. You're also going to be paying a lot more in interest over time, even though your home is cheaper. So I wouldn't wait for that. Now, if interest rates did go up, 1% or 2 or 3%, the biggest thing that would affect is some of the buyers who are on the very edge of buying a home. That would affect their affordability tremendously, which could take some of the demand out of the market. Now, if we continue to have a low supply like we do, and we have a relatively steady demand, we can see prices either stagnate or come down slightly, that $10,000 to $20,000, right? Now, we don't know how long that'll last. We could end up having a lot more inventory. Now that we have less demand, we could have closer to what we saw a few years ago, 6,000 to 8,000 homes on the market, more of a buyer's market. But at that point, we'll still be seeing appreciation. It'll just be that 3% normal appreciation that we usually see. It'll just take a lot of the steam out of our market, but by no means would it crash it. My recommendation is if you're going to buy a home in the next 5 or so years, I would just do it now, because what's going to happen is even if you get a home at a higher interest rate, let's just say you get one at 5, in a few years when the Fed decides to lower interest rates again because they increased interest rates a little bit too quick and they got to pull back more now that inflation is less of an issue, you're just going to be able to refinance, right? That's what a lot of people are seeing is, interest rates go up and they come down and they go up and they come down, and you're going to have time to refinance hopefully in a year or two. So I would buy a home, rent out the one you lived in before, take a little hit on the new interest rate, just refinance in a year or two when rates come down again. And just continue to own properties. Like I said before, the best time to buy real estate was last year. We're going to continue to save for the years coming. Real estate just continues to be the best investment right now. I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys made it to the end, please let me know down in the comments what I can do better to make this a little bit more enjoyable to listen to, and what I missed, what I didn't miss, what I hit good, what I didn't do good. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.